you're all going to need to know it at some point. So we're going to go ahead and go through it. So just to kind of kick things off, we have, I guess I should give people a little more time to come. Sorry, they're still coming in. If you remember, if you were part of session 1 this year, we kind of spent like the first 5 months of the year learning all the basics, right? So we went through like Google Search Console, Google Analytics, UI, so like the user interface, how to export data from those platforms, all that kind of thing. What I'm not going to do, candidly, is really repeat like any of that, because I think that, we want these to be like increasingly like building knowledge, not just a recap. So we have all those videos if you want to look at them and kind of get the basics again, or if part of this may feel a little chaotic if you're not really super familiar with the basics. So just FYI, don't feel like there aren't resources to kind of help you understand, kind of what we're going to go through today. So I'm a fan of visuals, so I'm going to share in the chat the kind of handout that we're going to walk through today. We basically have like 4 big sections that we're going to go through, and the big kind of picture category we're covering today is advanced site optimization techniques in Google Search Console. So as you all know, we often use Google Search Console, essentially diagnostically or for research, right? So we use it to figure out like what's going on a website, what are they ranking for, all that kind of thing, and for research to figure out, okay, where are the opportunities. So often we will use the existing content within the user interface of Google Search Console to find out diagnostically what's going on with the website. Then we'll export the data, which is what we spent a lot of time on in session 1 this year, getting the data off of Google Search Console so that we can move it around, because it is multidimensional data. That's really the only way to gain utility from it, right? To get insights, to see patterns, to kind of do all the data analysis components that we would need or want to do for SEO in those ways. So beyond that, Google Search Console can parlay into and work with platforms that unlock more advanced things. So yes, you want to know what's going on with a website, and yes, you want to be able to plan what you should do with a website, but there's a lot more to how SEO works than just what you read on the page. And so today we're essentially going to be working like, okay, what happens behind the scenes to make, like, if you take 2 identical pieces of content, right, which is going to be an issue we face increasingly in this world of AI generated content, right? So you take 2 things that more or less there's a negligible quality or coverage difference, similar key phrases, similar, content coverage, similar length, word count, all these things, right? What makes one of those win over the other? There are things you can do. There are things that you can do behind the scenes in the way that you structure data, in the way that you organize content, in the way that you appeal to a bigger and wider number of search engine results criteria. Okay. So there's the ranking factors conversation of how you, organize content to appeal to different Google ranking factors, which we'll talk about in a second. And then there's the SERP conversation. And I just want to have that really quick because SGE is real. It's here. People are using it, and we need to understand how it operates a little bit differently than historical versions of SERP. Okay. So SGE, as you know, is the search generative experience that was put out by Google. It's pretty much powered by Google's AI, which is called Bard. It's going to create summaries of search engine results. And essentially what we have found since the last Google algorithm update about 3 weeks ago was that the weight of different elements of content within a digital properties pack. Okay, so a digital property contains not just written text, right? Like your website just doesn't have written text on it. It also has images, it has videos, it has summaries of things, it has metadata, right? Like there are many components to a website that are not just text. So all of those components, including the geographic location where your website is registered with Google, like your Google business profile, all of those things have a role to play and show up in different areas of Google search engine results. Okay. We're finding that the weight of various elements of those, be it rich snippets, which we'll talk about in a second, people also ask, video content, Google business listings, is changing with SGE. So the generative experience appears to be aggregating regardless of where something is ranking, which totally upends a lot of things, right? So for us, for people who are largely content text on page driven, it means we have to zoom out. We have to zoom out. We have to think about the bigger picture of how a domain is structured. We have to think about how content is structured. And we have to consider how we're going to take those two equally valuable, equally content, key phrase, all these things, and make one rank. Okay. Make ours rank against a competitor's that for all intents and purposes is basically the same. Okay. So that's going to be kind of what we covered today. Okay. Does that introduction make sense? Do you have any major questions before we kind of get into these parts that we're going to talk through? I assume not. Again, if this feels like drinking from a fire hydrant, remember we have the early ones you can go through to actually learn Google Search Console and all that. We're going to go a little bit deep today. All right. So the big 4 areas we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about structured data and rich results. We're going to talk about structured data markup. Okay. We're going to talk about rich snippets and other rich results features, which I already alluded to in the SERP conversation. And then we're going to talk about the optimization. Okay. So these are kind of the 4 things that and again, this is technically a Google Search Console training because what we're talking about is data information that's available in Google Search Console that you then use to ping into some other platforms, right? So you need to kind of learn the bigger ecosystem of systems here. So we're beginning with Google Search Console and then kind of quickly getting into some other things that you'll kind of want to learn and know. All right, so the first is structured data. So do you all know what structured data is? Maybe not. Okay. So there are plenty of, and I'm going to give all of you guys access to this. I think I just did, but as you know, as writers, as SEO writers especially, when you go in and you write an article, you have an H1, you have H2s, you have H3s, you have metadata in the background, right? There's a forward-facing element that clues you in to structured data. Structured data is actually taking it a little bit further to address how something is set up in the code, okay? So if you look at, when you go to stage a blog, right? Most of us stage a blog in text. Does anybody stage a blog in code? I didn't think so. We don't really need to, right? Because we're using the UI of a CMS, right? We're using the user interface of a content management system like WordPress or HubSpot or something like that. That makes it very user-friendly. What we input when we take it from a Google Doc that has H2s and H3s and links and tags and photos, and we copy and paste all that information over, it's inheriting the structure that you created in the Google Doc. And then when you paste it in, the CMS, the UI that you're using in the CMS is automatically picking up all the categorizations, right? It should. If not, it's a hugely manual process, which is a huge pain in the butt. But you know that, right? Like if you go into WordPress, you copy it over, your H2s pick up, your H3s pick up, your links pick up, right? It picks up all of the things that you've formatted in the Google Doc. That is an example. You can, right? And if you had a good developer, basically structure something so that it's as easy as possible for a Googlebot to read. Okay, it's as organized as possible. There's as little extraneous code as possible. So if you know code at all and you're looking at the screen in front of you, you know that this is not jam-packed with style code. It's not jam-packed with text, with like font code. It's not jam-packed with line break code. So what does that mean? It means that all of those things were set at the theme level on the CMS so that every blog itself doesn't have to carry, it just inherits all the settings in this global editor, right? So you've got then a very streamlined and very short amount of code that the Googlebot is actually having to read for every single blog, okay? So some of this isn't within your control, right? Like some of this is like for us as writers or staging bloggers, like we're not going to go in and minify JavaScript. We're not going to go in and make coding edits, but it's important to understand how something works because diagnosing underperformance is, like I said, diagnostics is a big part of why GSC exists, and figuring out how to organize and structure content in a way that gives it a slight competitive edge. If this takes a millisecond less for a Googlebot to read, or if a Googlebot doesn't have to read through style every time or whatever, that gives this a competitive edge over this. So that's where we come into that, like the margins are getting thinner for what's going to differentiate things that rise in SERP and things that stall in this new search generative experience. And it's likely that this is one of the reasons. Okay. So that's basically it, right? You've got a very simple kind of format that Google has said it likes. Okay, that Google has said, like, for articles. Now, articles are not the only kind of data that can be structured. So I can show you, like, we have an article in our blog that I'll make sure you guys all have access to. I just made sure it's current today. But there are many kinds of data. So we will obviously work more in articles. Okay, but you can structure data for all kinds of things. For instance, product pages usually get a lot of structuring. Because think about it, the speed at which you can load a purse is like, it's an impulse buy. You want to see it right then, or you're not going to look at it at all, right? It's very, very important that it's fast and it's current and it's meaningful, and you have all the relevant buying information in the right order every single time, right? So if you're shopping online and you go to look at a brown purse, and then you go look at the smaller version of that brown purse, if the price was here, your eye is immediately going where? It's going there. And if you don't see it there, you get frustrated. Okay. So just thinking about informational design is a helpful way to if you're not very code oriented or techie, it's a very easy way to think about structured data. Local businesses. So structuring data the same way for all physical locations of a local business is part of the Google My Business play. As I mentioned earlier, the way that we're seeing SGE prioritize results in SERP could very well weight Google My Business, especially for geographically oriented companies, meaning brick and mortar on the ground. I've got a franchise near you kind of locations, right? So that local SEO play, it's very important that all of the directory information and content is structured exactly the same way every time. So that the user experience then becomes, okay, if this one's 10 miles away and that one's 12 miles away, and I click over, but the phone number was here on this one and it's here on, like, same thing, right? So you're just thinking about how are you making it as effortless as possible for Google to read it so that there's no interpretation needed. It's simply scan, scan, scan. And then how are you making it as easy as possible for humans to interact with the content kind of effortlessly? Everybody okay? Somebody said no. You can all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the no was just to what was structured data.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm not good at looking at the chat. I usually have, like, when I'm running a webinar, I'll have David look at it for me or something. Okay. FAQs. So I just want to get through all these categories. Today is obviously going to be a little bit like information because I'm going to give you this and you can go find the things about it that are important to you. But if you sit here, you've heard it once. So the next time you hear it, you'll be like, oh, I know what that means, right? Or at least I know where to find out what that means. Okay. FAQ structured data is something that we have done for a really long time, as you can see, because Alex actually wrote this one. FAQs are, our FAQ data is basically about ordering content to answer questions. So we're going to talk a second about rich snippet results. When you order content to answer questions and you do it in a certain format that's very brief, and you do it in a way where every sentence matters and every word makes sense, right? You become a candidate for people also ask, right? Which is Google Knowledge Center, which, as far as we can tell, is not going out of SERP and may even become a way to rank in SERP. Now, we have always been pursuing people also ask. Like, we know that Google Knowledge Center matters. We pay attention to the questions that we're answering and do so well. But creating ordered FAQs in an actual data, like structured data sense, is a way to enhance search results. Okay. So that's going to be something that you can always kind of go to. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the guide to FAQ schema. If you want to read this article, you can. Yeah, so this has to do with FAQ structured data and all of that. One of the things, so I guess the last thing I'll say before we kind of go through and test some stuff, and I'll show you like schema.org, is that like for instance, really good websites that have really good structured data, like one of our clients, Credible, Megan V has done a good job of helping with this, where it will show, like if you Google them, it will show them in the search engine results page, and then you'll get indentation. So you'll get an indented URL that is a semantically related and ranking key phrase. Okay, so for instance, if we're trying to get a client to rank for the word supply chain, and we can also get them to rank for the word supply chain management, if we have structured the data correctly, then you should see supply chain as the #1 result and supply chain management as an indented result. Now, historically, everything I just said would be greatly important and totally objectively true. In Google's latest like Q&A session they do once a month live on YouTube, John Mueller, who's like the main guy at Google search, said that indented results are like becoming less important. So I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case, but either way, it's a visible symptom, like it's a visible proof that somebody has taken pains to do structured data and is doing SEO the right way, and everything is organized so that there are kind of these asynchronous ranking factors happening that allow for multiple results. Okay, does anybody have any big questions? And then I'll kind of go into schema.org and rich results.
How much of this is typically baked into the CMS, and how much is kind of on you and the developers to kind of customize the CMS to get the most out of it, basically?
Yeah, it is far less baked in than you would think. So I am not obviously a coder or anything, but like I can pretty much go in and know that if somebody has bought a template, it's bad. They need to go edit the blog post template because it's not going to be structured well for data. I can also know that unless an SEO person was on the development team, if somebody launched a custom site, it will be bad because they don't know they're supposed to do this. And they don't take the time to do it at the theme level. So then every single blog you create is problematic. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you may not be able to solve the problem, but you may be able to identify the problem and then say, like, at the theme level, a developer needs to go in and adjust and do structured data work on the blog post. Like, you know, I mean, if you change the template, it'll roll down into every post. Yeah, it's a bummer. Any other questions? All right. So we're going to look at what Schema actually looks like now. So there are a couple of, so schema.org is literally where you go. Like, it's not a huge mystery, and there are not any really competitors. Okay. I mean, there are, but nobody cares. So schema.org is basically the gatekeepers of structured data. Okay. And you can use schema.org to investigate how content is, like the hierarchy of an HTML. So if you've ever been, you know, in one of our SEO report meetings and heard me talk about canonicals, if you've ever been in an SEO meeting and had, like for instance, when Ross did his site mapping exercise or training for us, and we talked about tiered URL structures, right? Every URL structure has a hierarchy. I mean, that's maybe like incredibly obvious, but let's just look at it really quick. Okay. So for instance, HireAWriter is our root domain. And when you go in to learn, you go into hireawriter.us/learn, right? So that means hireawriter.us is root domain. And then we've got a tier 1, which is just / wherever we're going. Okay. So just remember, URLs are just addresses. They're just addresses that are pointing somebody to places on the internet. Now, we have 8 blogs because we're overachievers. So every single blog is going to have a tag. Now notice that on purpose, I made sure that this was not going to be hireawriter.us /learn/blog. Because as you know, the hierarchy structure of URLs is extremely important when it comes to your crawl budget. So Google's not going to crawl more than 3 deep usually. So these websites that the clients get you to try to make that are, you know, blog / professional / construction / title of the blog, like, you'll never rank. Like, it's not possible. Google is not going to give you that much attention. So on purpose, point being, we made it hierarchy as backslash one. Then when you actually click into a blog, you'll see that this does go into a secondary URL based on the title of, this is actually very interesting, this delete act, you should read this. But it goes into a secondary URL based on the structure, okay? So this is business / is the delete act going to correct. Okay. So every single website in the entire world is set up that way. URLs are not unimportant. Like you can't just structure a website any way and expect it to work. Like it's very, very important for a variety of reasons, but very much including SEO and very much related to how data is going to be structured on your page. Okay. So there's kind of the URL level data, and that's what basically schema.org is talking about. Okay. Now I am not going, well, dare we? Dare we? We daren't. I will not subject myself to the humiliation of whatever that's about to tell us. What we will do is put Stacy's website in here. Let's run the test. So schema.org. Okay, we talked about URLs, structure. So schema is the word when basically you're talking about the structure of a website. Okay, so what you can do is you can insert a URL into schema.org, and then it's basically going to tell you how that website, oh, it's large. What's a small website we have that we could work on? What's like the smallest website? Our website's probably too big. Somebody help me. What's a really small website? Well, I mean, Franco's might be. Let's see. All right, we'll go in this way. Let's see if this is less. There we go. Okay. So he obviously has no errors because he's a technical SEO expert. So what this is telling us is it's going to basically give us the entire schematics, schema, get it? Okay. Of how his website is set up. It's going to give us all the class information. So what is that? Classes sit at the theme level, right? So that's colors, fonts, line spacing, all the things that you see, right, are the classes that you set up. And that's why a developer who doesn't know what they're doing has to do that for every page. Developer who knows what they're doing just sets those rules. And then those are the rules that every web page on that website has to obey, right? It has to look that way. You can see text, you can see div. So div blocks are obviously mostly how, websites are built. But basically what it does is it will tell you the entire structure of the website. Now, if he was not a technical SEO expert and he had built his website wrong, you would find things that are just flawed in his headers, in the article structure. But you can look here, this is exactly how the article structure is made. So this is the schema, right, for a blog article on his website. So I'm literally like reading how his website was set up. Okay. So this would have the type of article, the ID number it's going to have, headline. You see all the information. Okay. And this is going to account for basically every version of everything that his website could, kind of be set up to do. Okay. Yeah, how his footer is set up. So even just looking at these categories, you start to get an idea of what schema is about, right? You start to figure out, okay, these are the components that go into how a web page is actually created, how a website is actually laid out and created. So when we're making these site mapping conversations, this is what a developer is seeing in their head. A good one, right? They're seeing this is how the website would be set up. This is how we would build that. These are the building blocks you're telling me about. Okay, so this basically just validates that schema is set up the right way. Let's think of another small website that might be wrong. We will keep this off the internet. So this will happen. So if I'm having trouble, right, I see in Google Search Console, I'm looking at index errors, and I got a lot of index errors. I got pages not found. I've got canonical, user selected canonical is different, or alternate user selected canonicals available, things like that, right? I found those errors in Google Search Console. I would want to run this through here to see if they even have schema. This website doesn't. So they do not have a setup where they have basically told Google how to read their website. And what else do we see? These aren't set as classes, meaning whoever created this website is going in and doing it one by one by one by one. So for every single blog article, we can make the reasonable inference that Google's having to read all that information every time. Okay. So this is a huge problem when we talk about core web vitals, which we will in a second. So schema.org, schema markup validator, definitely a good place to go if you want to find stuff. And you can kind of go in and investigate what's going on with a client's structured or more likely unstructured data. And that's, yeah, basically how you validate whether data is structured or not. The next thing we'll look at is rich results. Do you have any questions though, before we go into that? None whatsoever. Okay. So rich results. Okay. Rich results, basically, let's actually do the same websites and see what we can find. Oops, we don't want to use code. We're not that fancy. So rich results are going to be things like featured snippets, things that are in the SERP that are complex, answers to questions, things like that. This is a Google tool. You could probably recognize by the font and format, but this actually has no rich results, which is not too surprising because they also have no schema, right? So let's see now about like narrative SEO. We'll go in and see what they've got. So this is any non-textual elements, right? So we talked about the variety of things that can be in SERP: video, images, carousels, infographics, snippets or summaries of content, things like that. So this is all the things that are not the blog itself, right? So if you see major flaws in a website, you go in, you go to schema.org, you look at the schema and you say, it does appear to be set up correctly. Like this doesn't have any major flaws in it. Then you might want to go in here and you could look and see, do I have anything in rich results? Okay. Can anybody think of a different way to see the variety of things that you have show up in SERP? Any other software system that we use almost every day?
SEMrush.
Yes, thank you. I was hoping somebody would say it. Okay. So obviously when you go into SEMrush, you're going to be able to see, well, I don't know who's coming out, but you want to bet it's Megan V. So when you go into SEMrush and you look at a website, you'll be able to see the variety of places in SERP where they are ranking for something, right? So if we go into domain overview, oh, good grief. Why is this happening to me? Where am I supposed to be going? Okay. And we go into the key phrases that they're ranking for. SEMrush obviously has a handy little icon system to tell you the nature of where things are ranking in SERP. Okay. So we've got links, right? We've got people also ask, we've got Google Knowledge Center, we've got images. So that would be a rich result. This would be a rich result. Okay. So why, again, why do we care? This is just like an academic exercise? No, because of the entire way I preface this conversation, which is to say that though we are people of the words, we must also be people of all of the other things that can make a website rank. Because in SGE, these things may become increasingly important. And I want you to have seen it once and to realize that what a website ranks for is not just text related. It has to do with how the data is structured and how easily it is for Google to see information. And it has to do data structure is absolutely the foundation of your ability to rank in rich results. Because if all of your photos and carousels and infographics and embedded videos are stuck in a hodgepodge spider web of unstructured data, Google will never find them. You can have photos on your website that never rank in Google because of the way your data is structured, or more likely unstructured. Okay, so that's why it's very important if we're ever going to move the needle on purpose for all of these things. So let's say sales spanking. What's happening right now? It totally does. Okay, I'm scared. Get off this. I lost my train of thought. Okay. If you are going to move the rich results on purpose, you need to understand how to find them, and you need to understand how to do that. And ranking images and carousels and videos and things like that is not just putting them on your website. It's putting them on your website in a way that Google can actually read them and then rank them. And to Ross's point, it's not usually done without somebody noticing it and fixing it. It's not usually done unless somebody goes in and does it on purpose. Okay. So it's very important for us to be, if we're going to be increasingly sophisticated diagnosticians, we need to be able to observe symptoms, and we need to be able to know all of the elements that impact outcomes, right? What are all the things that could possibly impact how a site is or is not ranking, and can we affect those? And historically, you know, we would be like, well, we're writers, but now we can't just be writers. We have to be more. We have to be proactively pursuing rankings for the entire range of SERP, which could become quite complex and quite multimedia, and that's fine. It's a wonderful new challenge, and we'll have an opportunity to tackle it. Okay, so that's rich results and basically rich snippets. This is an article, so we summarized, Mueller came out, if you don't follow him on X, you probably should, but kind of came out with some changes about FAQ rich results and FAQ page structured data. So if you're interested in any of that, it's pretty interesting. And then the idea bringing this back throughout this whole conversation, we need to bring it back to Google Search Console because that is the point of this training. But the Google Search Console reporting should be available in like your FAQ and how to search appearance. Okay, so when you're in Google Search Console, which we'll pull up, don't look at that. Okay, find something else. Who can we go to? Go to somebody neutral territory. And you go into search results, you're going to be able to see your search appearance, and you're going to look here, right? So if we look at our non-rich results, we got this many clicks, right? It doesn't appear that we have any rich results for this client yet. We will. Okay. And then in the Discover page, you'll see how you're ranking. We're not ranking in the Discover page there, but let's find a client we are ranking for just so you can see it. Who do you think would be ranking in Discover, guys? Maybe easier. All right. Well, if they were, it would be here. So, all right. So you can find the ways that people are experiencing the pages, but you're going to be looking more specifically at performance and specific search appearance for the various components of SERP. Okay. And if you have a target for something you're creating, you want to be able to monitor that. Okay. Last big section we're going to talk through today is mobile and core web vitals. These are technically 3 and 4 because these are 2 different things, but I'm going to go quick over the mobile one because I want you to, there's basically just 2 things I want you to learn. And then I want to focus a little bit more on core web vitals because the importance of those appears to be changing and the criteria for them appear to be changing. And I want you to be aware of what's going on. So obviously we know that Google indexes mobile first. If a website's not performing on mobile, it might as well not exist. It's a huge issue. Very similar to Ross's question about CMSs being set up for schema is the question of whether or not, I mean, jaw-droppingly not, like the average website template that people are using is not optimized for mobile, and or multiple versions of the website are actually being created. So there's this like shocking like delay in the development community to understand mobile friendliness and to create Snap. So like they're developing a website 3 times basically, right? They're developing the desktop version, the tablet version, and the mobile version, because all 3 of those have different clip points for view ports, right? Like it moves down, it moves up. Well, I'll show you. Right. It moves down like this, it moves up like this, right? That's your viewports. So as we think about that, it's very important to always be looking at whether or not a site is mobile friendly or not. The fastest and easiest way to do that is to use a tool called Lighthouse. If you have a GitHub account, again, I don't expect you guys, I don't think any of you are coders, so I don't think any of you might, well, Sanders might have a GitHub account. If you have a GitHub account, you can sign up for Lighthouse. If you don't have a GitHub account, just sign up for one and then you can sign up for Lighthouse. Okay. So it's kind of part of the like Google development community. But what you do is you basically go in, and I have Lighthouse installed as a plugin, and Lighthouse is just an analysis tool. So it's a Chrome development tool. Okay. And you just can go in and generate a report on any website. And what the report is going to tell you is basically give you like an instant read on mobile. So what I would, the trail I would have just taken if I was starting at Google Search Console evaluating a website is to basically go into page experience and figure out mobile, right? This couldn't be clearer. Oh my gosh. This is very sad. Let's move on to something less sad. That's so sad. Why is, okay. Okay, this one doesn't have enough data. Okay, that's fine when it does. Okay, well, this is, I don't know what's happening right now. The first result that you'll see in the page experience section of the GSC UI is mobile, and it's going to tell you how many good URLs you have on mobile. Dare we look at our own website? Don't show Shaoli. Okay, good. Whatever it ends up at. Okay, here we go. This is a fairly new website. So this one has 91.7 good URLs on total impressions of good URLs. Okay, that's great. So the first thing you're going to see is mobile. So if I saw something like 0% performance on mobile, I would immediately want to diagnose that further, right? I don't want to just tell a client like you have 0% performance on mobile. I want to like be able to explain something else to them, right? Like why and how, and should you fire your development agency? Okay, so what I would do is run Lighthouse report. So like I said, you go to Chrome Dev Tools, get a GitHub account, download Lighthouse, put it as a plugin on your website, and it's as easy as what I just did. Okay, don't show Franco this. So this is Lighthouse. What it does is it generates a report of how a website is performing, and it used to enable you to like toggle between desktop and mobile, which I don't see. Here we go. So what it'll do is it'll basically show you these elements, and I want you to like run your eyes over them for a second because we're about to talk about them in Core Web Vitals. So basically this is going to tell me that out of 100, I have a 61 in performance. Now, why? Okay. So what I want to know is why. Again, if I can tell a client your site's not performing on mobile, and then they'll go find a development agency. If I tell a client your site's not performing on mobile because of these 3 factors that would take about this much time for my developer to clear up, then I just won that business. Okay. So I always want to have an answer for people, or even if they don't hire us, to be able to go to another developer and say, I need these 3 things done. Because if you go to a developer and say, I need my site optimized for mobile, they're going to be like, cha-ching, like this person has no idea what they're doing, and I can charge them to redevelop their entire site. We always want to arm people with as much information as possible so they can get the answers that they need. Okay. So I would immediately see that there's obviously some JavaScript issues. So we would minify that, CSS issues, render blocking, image formats. I mean, these things are almost too easy to fix. Like it's just like beyond. Accessibility. So as you know, that's a ranking factor, the, contrast, things like that, ease of people using screen readers, and cognitive, people with cognitive limitations being able to get around your site well. Again, a structured data thing. If you have some crazy hamburger menus and some crazy URL structure that doesn't make rhyme or reason sense to anybody, that's actually an accessibility issue too, right? Like you're limiting your website's utility for people who have trouble maybe processing very quickly and things like that. Okay. User experience, best practices, SEO best practices. Okay. And then this does say structured data is valid. Okay. So this is again, like you're going to start to see all the terms that we're talking about today. Like all 4 of these concepts are very connected in this world. So that's why we're doing them all together. And I'm just talking at you because they are connected and it's easier for you to just hear it. And then I don't think you want to practice much of this, but you've heard it and you know about it. So that's good enough. Right in here, you would be able to see, you know, the structured data testing tool, and it's going to take you right back where we were. Okay. So again, we just went in a big circle, but we went for different reasons. Okay. So that's basically that. That's going to check. I do have an article on our website about progressive web apps. You may want to look at it if you're interested in that, but that's kind of a different topic we won't get into right now. So that's basically Lighthouse, and you would, you know, run that if you see performance issues, run that if you see mobile issues, and then be able to have like a punch list. You could obviously also run just an audit of the site in SEMrush, but I don't find like the output of what SEMrush gives you as far as recommendations is overwhelming. Like, here's the 85,000 things you need to approve on your website. And that I feel like is actually very discouraging to people and not helpful because they're not going to do those things. So I would rather always give somebody like, okay, based on this, I'm going to like shortlist for you the things that I think are the biggest problem that you can fix the fastest, right? Then you give them an early win and then they gain confidence to kind of keep improving things. So I think that Lighthouse is a really nice, elegant, tidy little report that you can use to kind of illustrate how things are performing on mobile. You know, the other thing I'll say is like a lot of people get a brand new site and they just assume. They assume the data structure correctly. They assume it's mobile friendly. And if we run this report and find that it's not, we need to be prepared to really serve because that's heartbreaking. Building a new site is incredibly time consuming and costly. But people are really often, they just don't know, right? And so if we know, it gives us an opportunity to serve people better because we can see things that they can't see. And then we can guide them in a way that's like ethical and not overcharging them. And just all the good things that we want to be in this world. Kind of the more knowledge we have, the better we can direct people. Okay. So that's mobile usability. I showed you where it was in GSC. I showed you kind of the path I'd go to. Any questions about that before we finish with core web vitals? I'll lose my voice. Angela's trying not to yawn. I get it. But you sat here and you heard it once. And now when somebody says it, you'll be like, I know what that means. All right. No questions? The last section we're going to go through is core web vitals. So this is something that actually comes up quite a lot and should, because it is a very important part of SEO. When you are in Google Search Console in the experience section, you know, we spend a lot of time in performance. We spend a lot of time checking page indexing, site maps. We've talked about all these things before. We just talked about mobile usability, right? So that's going to kind of tell you what is and is not usable, and it'll tell you why. The detail in here, I would always run Lighthouse too, because like text too small to read doesn't feel actionable. Like, well, what font am I supposed to use? Well, what size am I supposed, you know what I mean? Like it just, that feels very subjective. Clickable elements too close together, you know, things like that. So I think in Lighthouse, it gives you a little bit more of a technical explanation that then you can hand to a development team. Because if they have to go back to a designer, it's going to be a lot more expensive, right? Because then they have to go back to the designer, then back to the developer. So if you can simplify life for people, that's better. All right, so Core Web Vitals is in the experience section. It's in the middle one there in the UI. And basically you'll get an overview of how things are performing, okay? As you can see, this is a much less detailed overview than what we just saw in Lighthouse. And you can also see that Core Web Vitals are changing, which I'm not going to get into right now because it will be very time consuming for me to explain it to you. But basically what we'll do here is just look at how the Core Web Vitals report looks. Okay. So basically what you'll do is you'll see if it's poor, needs improvement, or if they're good. Okay. If they're not good, it's going to give you some reasons. So when I pulled up Lighthouse before and I said I wanted you to just like push your eyes over those categories, I want to just kind of show you really quickly the main categories that impact Core Web Vitals. So the first is the largest contentful paint, which I feel like sounds like finger painting, and it just makes me think of finger painting every time I look at it. What that means is how long it takes in view content to load. Okay. You load up a website, how long it takes the content that you should see to show up. Now, can you immediately identify something that's very trendy in web design that could hurt that?
That lazy
Videos.
Lazy load, videos, animations, right? So this is full end of the loading time, right? So LCP can be dramatically affected by things that people just think are cute. Is it worth sacrificing? Maybe, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, we have an animation and it's only there because I don't know how to take it off and Shaylee's too busy. But it's, you know, we should take it off. That's a problem, right? If it becomes really, really long before you can see something, because you immediately think there's something wrong with the website. You just do. Okay. So first input delay is obviously another. So that's how long it takes the first thing to show up, right? So if you're just sitting there, it's like a white screen. Okay, how long that takes. And then cumulative layout shift. So what do you think that means? The scroll. Okay. So as you're scrolling, you should not see a delay. Like if you scroll up, the content should just appear instantaneously, but it doesn't always, right? Sometimes you go and it's like, and it takes like half a second. And then you're like, what's going on? Do I not have Wi-Fi here? Like, okay, people are very impatient, and that's not a judgment of humans. That's a judgment of all of us. I guess we are humans, but all right. So these are some of the site components that impact core web vitals. Where we also saw those show up was here. Okay. Some other things are obviously like aggregates. So it's important to look at kind of overall speed. So for instance, if your client's like, but that animation is the core essence of my branding and I will not get rid of it no matter what it costs me. Okay. Can we save speed somewhere else? Right. So you figure out, like, is there a good aggregate score that you could get someone to by just adjusting a few of these elements? The other huge culprit of core web vitals that like is so antiquated, but so common is, well, there's, I guess, two of them, but the first is image formats. So if you have a bunch of JPEGs and PNGs, non-compressed images on your website, obviously that's a huge problem because it's load time every time. Okay. And part of that is style, you know, contemporary development protocol, things like that. And part of it's being affected by user behavior as people use non-cache browsers. So when you've gone to a website before and you go to it again, your browser, if you're not using a non-cached browser, remembers it, right? It's cached, meaning it pops up, your username pops up, your logins, your passwords, right? Like you've cached that. The expiration of first-party cookies changed speed a little bit. The user behavior of non-cache browsing is changing it even more, because it means every time someone comes to your site, it loads from scratch for the first time, as though it were the first time. Okay, so for like an e-com site, that could be really problematic. So just thinking about stuff like that. Okay. Reducing image file sizes, changing to WEBP and other modern file formats for images would be like a no-brainer. I mean, you should never have a video on a website ever. It should always be embedded in a lightbox, like basic stuff, right? Like a developer should know this, but if you pull up a brand new website and you see these problems, it would be so helpful if you knew it too. And then you could be like, but wait, you know. And then the other is code. So, I mean, I cannot tell you the number of times that, I mean, poor Shaylee lives her life minifying JavaScript, which just basically means shortening it. All she's doing is editing it. Like code has all these extraneous considerations. It has classes organized wrong because the website was built. They're not inheriting classes page to page. It's doing it from scratch each time. I mean, there's all these little kind of problems that people collect over time, and those in force become a really, really big problem, where we had a client whose website was taking 7 seconds to load. And it was like so far gone, we've had to redo the website. Like it was so far gone, we just had to like burn it to the ground. Right? This is a pretty big website, but it just at scale, these problems become really, really, really tricky. Okay. And then the last thing I just want to show you kind of that the Lighthouse would show you is the chaining. Okay. So this is part of the way a website is communicating. So like it's communicating with the DNS server, it's communicating with hosting. It's like there's a lot happens in the time it takes you to click on something and for it to load, like more than you could possibly imagine. And the longer those things get relayed, or the more they get relayed through, the slower it goes. Okay. So a lot of times one of the questions you ask is if you see really problematic speed issues and you're like, the schema looks okay, that we've reduced all the images, we've minified, like we've done everything we can. Now what? Sometimes you have to look into their hosting. Like sometimes there's no answer other than that a giant hosting company sold little bits of its hosting servers out to all these other little companies, and then they sold pieces of it to all these other little companies. People are making a financial cut all the way, but your website's actually going through 6 ports before it gets loaded to a user. You can't do anything about that. You're not going to speed all those things up. There's nothing you can do on the website level that's going to affect that. So it just becomes kind of a really root cause problem that's actually fairly easy to change, right? Like website hosting is not incredibly difficult to change. All right. So those are the basics of Core Web Vitals. Definitely something that you need to be monitoring month over month for clients. I'm going to do a very quick recap and then we'll do any questions. So we talked about structured data. Structured data is basically the informational design. It's the way that all content on a website is organized. Okay. The best kind of structured data is done according to a schema. And a schema is a way of organizing that content so that it is as easy and efficient as possible for Google bots to read it. Okay. When you have really, really good schema, really, really good organized data, and it's very easy for Google bots to read, you gain the opportunity to have rich results. Rich results are essentially capitalizing on all of the opportunities in SERP, including images and audio and video and text and all the things, right? So rich results can be a powerful way to leverage where we think SERP is heading, so that you can rank for more things and have even multiple URLs rank for either semantically or content related, right? Related content, either semantically related content or like the actual content itself is related. Okay. There are ways to test and to validate whether or not schema is set up for a website. And you can find in Google Search Console symptoms that would lead you to investigate that. Okay. You can try to have more rich results. And you do that by investigating in Google Search Console what the page experience is like, investigating in a tool like SEMrush, where a client's site and the various URLs are ranking in terms of rich results and different, formats of content. And by addressing how data is structured or actually creating content that is structured like marked up data. Okay. And then lastly, figuring out how you look at mobile score and Core Web Vitals in Google Search Console, and then how you cross-reference the content you see there in a tool like Lighthouse, beginning to investigate more at the website functionality level, what could be wrong, what could be improved so that a website can perform better, so that it has better UX and it has better search engine results, because Core Web Vitals is currently a ranking factor, though that will be changing slightly. That's my summary of everything we talked. Could I have just said that? Don't tell me if that's true because my throat's sore. Okay. All right. Questions, thoughts, things that you've seen that I didn't mention. Open floor for a second. Face like, why am I here? You have to ask at least one question or say one thing.
I've kind of got one. So as far as like how you approach this with clients, is there always like these are the problems, now you need to go to get a developer? Like how much of this can you actually tackle on your own without coding experience?
I mean, so we have Shioli. So if you're, for hire writer, like we can do all of this. like, and I often will recommend that. Like I said, I think the biggest strength of somebody who maybe doesn't have access to a coder is being able to give clients an understanding of what they should hire someone to do, like really specifically, so that they know, like, these are the 3 big things you need to do. I mean, I think all of us should know how to compress images. If we don't, we should learn. It's too easy not to do. All of us know how to like structure data in a blog article the correct way and observe if it's not structured the right way for a website. Those kind of things. So I think it's more kind of observation and then being able to summarize what needs to be done. Thank you for asking the question.
No problem.
I appreciate you. Anyone else? All right, was this helpful?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel we've just drank from the fire hose. I'm sure everyone else feels the same. But yeah, like you said, next time we see it, we'll have a much better understanding of it.
Good. And like I said, I think there's like at least 6 or 8 blogs on the Hire a Writer site you can reference to like follow up if you have little ideas, things like that. And then I will get you, you've got this handout, but I'll put it in Slack as well. So you've got access to it. And we did record today, although, I mean, reread, re-listen, but you're welcome to. All right. Anything else, guys? Okay, so next week is going to be less technical, I promise, and we'll actually be interactive like we usually do. We're going to talk about attribution modeling in GA4 and actually set up like customer journeys and talk about how we associate or how we like pull the data from the website into GA4 to like map a customer journey and then associate even like counts for like MQL or SQL scoring and even dollar amounts to it, so that we could look at deals won and things like that, that actually all the data is in GA4 itself. To my thinking, that's one of the most useful elements of GA4. So I think that that will be good. And then I will give you the setup, like the GA4 setup. I'll give you like an overview of the one that Megan did that we're training the Association for Accounting Marketing or whatever we're training on Friday, David and I. I'll give you the setup document there too if you want it, so you can just double check things for clients and troubleshoot if you need to. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you for being here. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Slack me if
Thank
you need
you.
me.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks.
guys.